Welcome. Today we will journey into the heart of the harsh Arctic North to understand how the Chukchi people, living in an area comparable in size to Kazakhstan, have endured centuries of isolation and extreme conditions. How have such small and remote communities managed to preserve their unique traditions, which often seem harsh or even shocking to us? In just 1 hour, they hunt on vast plains and perform ritual ceremonies related to the rebirth of souls. While thousands of kilometers away, secret deals are made that could change everything. Why, despite natural isolation and the brutality of the climate, did this people develop their customs as if responding to the challenges of a dying world? Were their strict educational practices and military rituals part of survival, or habits that eventually became burdens? And at stake, the preservation of their heritage or the disappearance of old traditions amid global changes. In this investigation, we will gather all these scattered elements and reveal who really conducts the story of the Chukchi. Are you ready to see what lies beyond the impenetrable borders of their world? Then let's begin. In the distant, untamable tundra, where endless snowfields are replaced by icy ocean expanses, live people whose fate has been intertwined since ancient times with the harsh symphony of northern winds and permafrost. This is the Chukchi people, one of the last guardians of a unique culture that survived against what seemed an insurmountable natural barrier. Their territory is an immense drama of nature and history, like a vast space encompassing an entire epoch, from the shores of the Bering Sea to the origins of the Indigirka River, from polar ice to the winding beds of the Anadyr and Anjuj rivers. The size of this landmass is comparable to a small country, a tiny continent where life forms and cultures have developed in conditions of extreme isolation and constant struggle for survival. The geographical and historical isolation of the Chukchi is no mere coincidence. It is the chief architect of their worldview. Endless icy expanses, the doom of harsh winters, prolonged polar nights, and the midnight sun that never sets. All of this created conditions in which natural selection became an integral part of their cultural and biological heritage. There was no room here for the weak or fragile traditions. Each generation had to learn to live in a world where nature asks no questions and simply takes. And it could do so very harshly, with ruthless severity. From here come the ongoing struggles for sustenance, the most difficult hunting practices, survival in extreme climatic conditions where temperatures can drop below -30 degrees Celsius, and the wind of the blizzards feels like a sharp dagger slicing skin and soul. The history of this land is inscribed across the ages in myths, beliefs, and traditions. The mythology of the Chukchi is not just fairy tales for children, but a kind of unwritten code reflecting their attitude toward the world, death, and rebirth. In their beliefs, people do not disappear forever. They are reborn, returning to the world of ancestors, to the spirits of nature, to the very origins of being. Reverence for death is not an act of mourning, but an expression of respect, honor, and gratitude. Omens, ritual dances, ceremonial hunts, all are imbued with symbolism and magic, intertwined with the dangerous practice of fighting for life. Enchanting hunting and combat traditions are not merely crafts, but a deep code of survival, where each arrow and each movement carries the knowledge of millennia. The physiological features of the Chukchi are gifts from their environment. Their bodies are naturally adapted to the cold more than anyone else's. Elevated levels of hemoglobin and red blood cells enable them to withstand periods of hunger and low temperatures. While their skin is rough and thick, almost like protective armor, they possess a specialized thermoregulatory system that increases heat production, sometimes to extremes. Their physical endurance, honed through countless battles with nature, makes them living witnesses to survival in the most chaotic and brutal environment possible. Their internal organs and body structure are arranged so that every movement is the result of millions of years of adaptation, every breath an act of battling the icy elements. Their social structure is another chapter of an ancient book. The Chukchi can be seen as a patriarchal community, where the family is not just a social unit, but the very foundation of the world. Men raised in the spirit of toughness and martial valor are taught from an early age the skills of hunting, crafts, and survival. Women, in turn, preserve the home hearth, teach children, and pass down ancestral wisdom. Education in the North is not for the faint-hearted. It begins from the very first days. Children are introduced to harsh realities immediately, learning patience, discipline, and resilience. Each family is a unique world, where traditions, rituals, and knowledge are transmitted from generation to generation through special rites, perceived not as outdated or archaic, but as a sacred connection to the past and future. Historical accounts of these traditions, recorded by you in the 19th and 20th centuries, reveal unique practices of socialization and combat training that initially seemed cruel, sometimes even shocking. Hunting training is a whole school steeped in strict discipline, where the memory of enemies, spirits, and sacrifices is an integral part of raising a young hunter. Junior members of family schools were raised under strict mentorship, learning to compete with nature and each other, becoming part of a harsh yet logical world where every gesture and decision mattered. And here arises the central question of our chapter. How did what was created over centuries survive face-to-face with the constant threats of the environment? How were these cultural practices formed? Part 3 of 12. Were they merely the result of extreme natural conditions? Or was there something deeper beyond their boundaries? A system of values that, when necessary, provides the resilience to survive and preserve one's identity. It might seem that harsh customs, strict upbringing, and severe rituals are only superficial aspects. But it turns out that behind them lies a rational, well-thought-out whole. Or does it? Could such an inexorable code, such a rigid cultural practice, seemingly be nothing more than the boundaries of an era that is rapidly fading into the past with each passing year? Perhaps these traditions, centuries old, are now more than just dead heritage. They are a living testament of a people resisting disappearance, or conversely, a corroded, dying phenomenon that requires critical reconsideration, rethinking, and new life, more rational and humane. Distant in space and time, these cultures are not merely an ethnographic puzzle. They are a mirror of human capacity for adaptation, for resisting elements, for preserving one's identity amidst boundless and relentless trials. But will their traditions survive into the new century? Can practices hardened by centuries become a new, more evolved stage in the evolution of peoples? Or are they merely calls for oblivion, memories to be left behind, making way for a newer, more flexible and humane world? This question affects not only the fate of the Chukchi, but also our understanding of those boundaries beyond which the true compromises between nature, traditions, and human reason remain. Evidence, testimonies, and analysis show studying their culture is not just a historical duty, it is a destiny, inseparable from reflections on survival and development. And every gesture, every word of theirs is a small key to understanding a world where each tradition reflects not only the struggle for life, but also the struggle for meaning. That is why their harsh practices are not only expressions of nature, but also manifestations of deep human values that, despite all trials, remain alive and demand our attention and understanding. Deep within the harsh tundra, where silence is broken only by gusts of wind and the soft rustling of taiga, lives a culture whose values were shaped by constant struggle for survival. The Chukotka tribes are not just a community. They are a living vessel of traditions, forged in the fiery blaze of cold nights and endless plains. In their words and traditions are captured the harsh practices transformed into tools of upbringing and survival, into mysteries that determine not only the fate of the warrior, but also the entire social structure. From a young age, boys were immersed in some of the most rigorous tests to prepare them for the endless hardships of life. At 6 years old, a boy took his first step into the world of adults, the first into a world where strength, resilience, and uncompromisingness are not just words, but the laws of life. During long winter evenings, when the crimson light of the setting sun barely touched the horizon, boys wrapped in reindeer fur coats were taught to sleep standing up. Imagine the scene, the silence of night, broken only by the steady, shallow breathing rhythm of the young warriors standing on their feet. The child's face displayed an expression of concentration and patience. Every movement was a challenge to oneself, to one's body, to one's will. This practice was not merely physical training, it was a psychological test designed to explore the boundaries of human endurance, reflecting the spirit of the era itself. But resilience was tested not only during sleep. The elders, under their invisible supervision, would silently sneak up on the sleeping boy with the secret intent of testing his reaction. In the darkness of night, there was a rustling, sticks sliding along fur, burning red heated metal objects flashed in the hands of the experienced mentor. The screech and faint squeal heard were not just pain tests, they were a ritual, with all its dirt and brutality, meant to teach children to control fear, stay cool-headed, and increase their resilience. At that moment, the inner armor was forged, an essential shield to protect them in the most desperate situations. Weapon training was another chapter in this harsh story. Surviving in the tundra depended directly on skills with a bow, a hunting knife, and simple yet deadly precise ancient tools. In the hands of these young boys, sometimes covered with bruises and calluses, were skills suited for killing and defense. Every shot from the bow was not just a marksmanship exercise. It was a formula of courage encoded in the genetic code of the generation. Minor injuries, bruises, cuts, sometimes even torn fingers, testified that the training was tough, but not optional. It prepared them for battle against wild beasts and hostile nature. Endurance was regarded as an absolute value. To harden their bodies, boys tied heavy stones to their legs and ran after reindeer, covering kilometers in unpredictable conditions. Each such run became a test of character. The howling cold wind, twisted reins, stones piercing the flesh, and insane speed, all merged into a continuous flow of pain and the desire to beat oneself. It was not just exercise, it was a lesson teaching them not to give up despite fatigue. Death whispered in their ears, "You are weak, you will not survive." In these rituals, a special form of inner resilience was cultivated, which was meant to become their weapon in the endless war for survival. True mastery in developing courage and vigilance was achieved through independent hunting, another chapter of this epic chronicle. Boys armed with bows and knives went into the forest, while their father, like an invisible spectator, secretly shot at them from hiding. There were no voices, only the arrow's flight and tense atmosphere. This was a unique, almost mystical ritual of testing. They learned to sense the slightest movement, respond to unexpected situations, and maintain focus when all seemed lost. Their vigilance was tested to the limit, and the very task of not giving up, staying composed, became their second nature, an essential guarantee of future survival in endless, harsh environments where weakness had no place. The most difficult and at the same time most tragic aspect was the attitude towards death. In a culture where dying bravely on the battlefield was regarded as the greatest act of courage, there existed a special understanding of this process. There was no fear, only duty, honor, and memory. The custom of drawing dots on the back of the hand was not merely a childhood game, but a symbolization of deserved battle. Each dot served as a testimony to endured trials, a tribute to those fallen in battle, a reminder of the cost of bravery. These dots bore witness, blood and experience, that every confrontation with death only made them stronger and their spirit unbroken. But what is important to understand is that all these practices, all these rituals, seem to embody more than mere preparation for military life. They were the architecture of social order, means of asserting the authority of elders, and the unacceptability of weakness. These harsh tests form the foundation of a patriarchal system where masculinity was not just a concept, but an embodiment of status, privilege, and a demand placed upon the future warrior. Were these practices necessary for adapting to the severe conditions? Or were they tools reinforcing tradition, rooted in ancient rituals and customs that consolidated the authority of elders and set strict boundaries within patriarchy? The question remains open, and at its core lies an essential one. Why were such trials needed when life in the modern world had completely changed? Technologies, weapons, cultural values, all of these differ radically from the times when such rituals were an integral part of survival. Yet, at their deepest level, there is something universal in them, something that can still be rethought today. How applicable are these strict standards, not only for cultivating strength, but also for shaping character? And what remnants of these practices remain in modern society? A profound question, to which no historian or researcher can give a definitive answer. For now, at the heart of the tundra, the esotericism of hearts endures, living by the laws of harsh trials, reminding the world of the price of courage, and that sometimes, to feel strength, one must pass through the darkest night. In the dark, windy expanses of the Siberian tundra, where every breath freezes in the air and it seems time has stopped, a primitive civilization resides, the Chukchi. Their history is not just a chronicle of a people, but a story of survival, adaptation, and preserving their unique traditions on the edge of possible. And in these strict, inhospitable conditions, women played a special role as guardians of the home, keepers of the clan and culture. Their image, their duties, their rights, all are an inseparable part of the social system of Chukchi society, which was formed over centuries under the pressure of harsh natural conditions and historical challenges. Chukchi women are not merely bearers of the hearth. Their activities encompass all aspects of household and social life. Imagine an early morning when the tundra is just waking up. A woman, wearing a heavy fur scarf and with caring eyes, sits down at a needle glistening with frost. Her skilled, swift hands create warm clothing, sew leather items that withstand storms and cold. Their responsibilities include making clothes, preparing food, salting reindeer meat, and processing fish and berries for the long winter months. They are natural caretakers, endlessly occupied with preserving and maintaining life within the confines of their settlement. It is important to understand that the borders of these settlements, which perhaps could be bypassed, were strictly guarded. Women were forbidden to leave their communities, and the reason was clear: to protect them. In a situation where external threats are not immediately visible and loneliness could be fatal, such restrictions seemed like a thoughtful, rational measure. A woman who crossed the boundaries risked losing her safety, her family. The preservation of internal harmony and stability was linked to this strict rule. Amidst the harsh winds and cold gusts of night, securing their rights within the family and community, women actively participated in the dissemination and transmission of traditional culture and knowledge. They were keepers of crafts, knowledge about herbs, signals of nature, animal behavior, and rituals associated with seasons and household management. However, despite the strict boundaries and clear social structure, women possessed a certain degree of independence in society. They were allowed to manage inheritance and participate in choosing partners, which indicates that some social autonomy was preserved, albeit within a patriarchal system. In families, the husband's role was dominant. He was the head, the support, the decision-maker regarding festivals, work distribution, and maintaining order. The woman was the executor, the hearth keeper, a caring mother, and homemaker. This balance was maintained through internal harmony based on ancient traditions. But what price did society pay for this harmony? From time to time, special cases arose, related to demographic challenges. If a family remained childless for a long period, tradition allowed that the woman could be transferred to her husband's brothers. This ritual was often a necessary measure to increase the kinship's numbers and strengthen the lineage. Thus, women became not only maternal forces, but also instruments for preserving the clan in a context where each life had exceptional significance. In this context, the transfer of a young wife concealed a complex, sometimes tragic chapter of the institution of marriage and family, transforming personal fates into an element of collective reproductive strategy. Women's lives were deeply intertwined with rituals and practices related to birth and death. Their ceremonies embodied the full depth of beliefs, magical rites, and traditions. As labor began, women would retreat into special yurts, separate from their family homes, where they gave birth in seclusion, trying to avoid screams and noise to not attract evil spirits. These moments, shrouded in mystery, were not only physiological acts, but also sacred events. Birth was accompanied by rituals, cutting the umbilical cord, discarding the afterbirth, washing and prayers. Every detail in these rituals held a sacred meaning, reinforcing tradition and strengthening the bond between generations. A woman giving birth herself, or with the help of older women, became a link between the past and the future, between life and death. Death rites were also conducted within a special context. Clan ceremonies disguising death, memorial services, all contributed to the spiritual structure that maintained the social fabric. Specific rituals were also part of these practices, throwing remains into the river, enchantments, symbolic sacrifices. These traditions were not merely acts of honoring ancestors, but also ways to reinforce faith in the powers of nature and spirits. The profound question underlying all these practices was how the functioning of such strict, traditional roles of women influences the preservation of the population size and social structure of the Chukotka society in harsh climate and small numbers. Can these foundations withstand modern challenges? Will the culture survive if it does not retreat from the forces of technological progress, migration, and global changes? Will the values that have shaped a unique system for centuries, where women are not just homemakers, but the foundation of social civilization on the edge of the world, disappear forever? These questions imply not only a survival strategy, but also the last chance to understand whether traditional roles in women's rights can adapt. Perhaps their flexibility and openness to change will be the key to a new era. Or conversely, these laws, inherited from centuries past, are doomed to vanish under the pressure of modernization, destroying the ancient health rooted in simple yet strict rites, leaving behind only the smoldering remains of long-forgotten traditions. Time will show whether ancient rites and customs, ingrained in blood and land, can withstand a storm of change, or will fall into oblivion, making way for a rapidly transforming world. And who will become the new keeper of this unique culture? The ones who ask these questions, or the future, which already seems inexorable? In a time when stories of loyalty and devotion became part of the national epic, transforming them into legends, there was a special understanding of the relationship between men and women, the most sacred and simultaneously the most dangerous space of human interaction. In the 10th century, deep within medieval societies, where the value of honor was measured not only by glory or wealth, but primarily by loyalty to one's destiny, customs reflecting these values, and often their opposites, were established. At a time when individual fates were intertwined with the destinies of entire communities, loyalty and self-sacrifice became the foundation of relationships, worthy of admiration and simultaneously dangerous for those who sought to violate them. Stories of people brave to the point of self-sacrifice, of women and men willing to give everything for love or higher ideals, were preserved in folk memory as examples of ultimate trust and mutual devotion. Yet, it was also during these times that unusual customs arose, which over time might seem strange or even shocking to us today. In an era when social and economic realities were based on a different and often brutal system, intimate relationships acquired a meaning beyond mere personal happiness. Accounts from history tell us that in certain communities, people not only believed in the power of mutual exchanges, but also practiced them to preserve and strengthen the tribe. These were not just rituals, they were institutions rooted in tradition, where trust and the cult of family took on extraordinary forms. Moving forward to the dawn of the 20th century, in the 1980s, a period that seemed quite distant from primitive rites, but still retained traces of ancient customs, similar practices emerged. Those years in Russia, especially among the working class, saw customs that shocked even the most tolerant. Hospitality reached such limits that sometimes the host would offer a guest to spend the night with his wife. Each such situation was not merely a formality, but a manifestation of a special social code, a kind of test of trust and division of social space. Often, if the guest refused the offer, he was perceived as an insult to the host, a person who was infringing on his honor and social status. This phenomenon raised many questions and debates. Was it a sign of deep trust in the guest and a reflection of a culture of hospitality, or a darker side of social exploitation? When such practices became part of daily life, they undoubtedly also served as a form of social protection. In conditions where resources were scarce and the population small, these customs functioned as an unofficial rotation of the gene pool, exchange of traits and characteristics. At the same time, in traditional villages where family and kinship ties existed as a unified whole, this was often more than just a practice. It was a way to express special trust and support, a means to ensure the continuation of the lineage, especially during times when birth rates seemed insufficient for population recovery. In some cases, particularly during periods of childlessness, the future wife could temporarily be placed in the hands of relatives to increase the likelihood of producing heirs. Such customs are deeply rooted in a culture where family is not only a blood relation, but also a mechanism that allows the entire community to survive. In Germany, the Balkans, Eastern Europe, every part of the world has developed its own practices aimed at safeguarding the population and its numbers. These rituals still provoke debate today. Some scholars see them as acts of care for the people, a peculiar way to preserve and strengthen their population. Others view them as violations of human rights, forms of social exploitation, or even violence against the individual, despite cultural traditions. This raises the question: are these cultural legacies that must be respected and preserved as part of the collective history and identity of the people? Or have they long lost their relevance, becoming remnants inherited from ancient times and accidental artifacts of the past that contradict modern views on freedom and human dignity? Can a society that demonstrates incredible progress in human rights and equality today afford to continue such traditions? Or will they forever be consigned to history as symbols of a bygone era, giving way to contemporary values? This question remains open. And perhaps most importantly, it is crucial to understand that behind these customs lie deep roots, intergenerational connections, and attempts to maintain a balance between social exchange and personal boundaries. They are part of a complex mosaic of human relationships, shaping destinies, forging character, and cementing trust, or even, no matter how it sounds, voluntary submission. Times change, society evolves, and moral perceptions shift. But do these practices remain merely history, called the past? Or can they be reincarnated in new forms in the modern world? And here, at the crossroads of historical epochs, we face a key question: how to preserve cultural heritage without losing the values that are considered fundamental for a dignified and free person today? Is it possible to resist ancient customs without losing respect for the past? Or will these centuries-old traditions only retain their strength in the shadows of history, capable of disappearing under the pressure of modernity, or, in contrast, finding new ways to manifest themselves? The question that remains without a final answer is not just a philosophical debate, but a real challenge for those building the future based on the past and hoping to create a society where the individual is of value in itself. We can only watch as these traditions, rooted in centuries, continue their path or vanish, forever lost, to the ashes of time, making way for new values, new perspectives, and a new epoch. Meanwhile, in the heart of ancient customs lie not only stories of love and trust, but also troubling questions about the limits of human freedom and the necessity of protecting them in any society. In the shadowless silence of the northern expanses, an entire era is born, wrapped in legends and traditions that have endured through the ages like an unchanging stream of time. The fate of these traditions is no longer just a subject of history. It's experienced and tested by those who continue to live under the harsh sky where winter seems endless and every natural phenomenon is a sign that interweaves the past and the present. Today, we return to thoughts about the importance and relevance of studying the Chukotka traditions. In each of them lies an inexhaustible source of wisdom and spiritual strength. Their study is not merely a scientific necessity, but an important mission, wrapped in the reverence for their uniqueness. Their preservation holds hope for the future, the possibility of safeguarding not only ritual practices, but also the very soul of the people. As each generation continues to keep ancient customs in their hearts, adapting them to modernity, often invisibly transforming them into a bridge between eras. Unfortunately, objective facts show that many traditions connecting the Chukotka people to their history are fading or undergoing serious transformation under the influence of the modern world. Images and rituals, once embedded in collective memory and practice, now face challenges posed by globalization, technological progress, and cultural exchange. Hunting, upbringing, community relations, rituals associated with caring for the deceased, all of these are at risk of disappearing or becoming part of modern layers, losing their authenticity. One enduring element that stretches through the centuries is that, both in the past and today, patriarchal structures continue to shape social hierarchy, and the role of women remains important, albeit under the weight of new challenges. Attitudes toward death, which in many cultures serve as oracles and rites of passage, remain deep and intrinsic among the Chukotka. These customs are not merely fragments of the past, but form the foundation of their worldview, a legendary thread binding generations together. The uniqueness embedded in these traditions deserves respect and careful attention. In each gesture, in every word, lies the depth of culture expressed through distinctive forms, not only for historical justice, but also for the future. Their distinctiveness is like a rare, precious gem that must be valued and protected as fiercely as hunters cherish their trophies or elders their ancient legends. The world we live in is changing at an incredible pace. The question of preserving and simultaneously modernizing traditional practices becomes increasingly urgent. Here, it is worth asking oneself an important question: how to preserve the essence without losing what is valuable, and at the same time, how to integrate ancient customs into the modern cultural fabric. Is it possible for ancient knowledge, gaining new expressions, to continue serving people without becoming an anachronism? This challenge is not only for scientists and ethnographers, but for society as a whole. As we develop ideas about potential implementations, we must remember, fundamentally, it is about preserving identity, about preventing language and traditions from falling into eternal oblivion. Against this background, the question of intercultural dialogue becomes even more important, about a world where understanding and respect for differences serve as the thread connecting different eras and peoples. Exploring Chukotka's traditions is not merely an academic interest, It is an act of building bridges that enhance mutual respect, a call for flexibility and openness. After all, by studying and appreciating the rich heritage of Northern peoples, we learn not only to preserve the past, but also to construct the future. This process offers vast opportunities for seeking new forms, renewing practices, and creating fresh dialogue between history and modernity. For the Chukchi, preserving traditions is not just an archaeological mystery or a ceremonial costume. It is a living organism, capable of developing and adapting without losing its authentic character. However, the romanticism of preservation is only part of the picture. The main challenge before us is whether and how the traditional towers of Chukchi culture can continue to develop in the context of global trends. Is it possible for an ancient costume woven from animal skins, ritual songs, and legends to become part of the modern world while retaining its spirit? And what if these customs, infused with new life, become a bridge between the past and the future? Or do we risk giving them up, losing the invisible thread that connects the Chukchi soul to its land? This is not a philosophical question, but a vital one. Time relentlessly dictates its terms, and even the most resilient traditions sometimes bend under the pressure of modernity. Blurred boundaries between culture and commerce, the global market, digital technologies, all these are like dust storms that can sweep everything away if preservation is not timely undertaken. Nevertheless, we have a solution: to allow traditions to adapt without losing their essence, to integrate the wisdom of ancient customs into new forms relevant to an era of technological innovation and social change. This is not an easy path. It requires patience, keen understanding, and respect. But if we can preserve the heritage and at the same time give it a new voice, we will witness a remarkable synthesis. Perhaps this is how we will unite the past and the future, ensuring that the richness of Chukotka's traditions flourishes without losing its originality. In this lies both the challenge and the hope. After all, if we learn to love and respect the cultural wealth of a people once considered wild, our world will become richer and wiser. And this is the universal goal that unites researchers, society, and ultimately, the people themselves. Understanding and preserving cultural heritage is not only a matter of national pride, it is also a chance to build bridges spanning centuries and erasing the boundaries between the mystique of the past and the realities of the future. And perhaps, through dialogue and respect for ancient traditions, we will be able to create a world where every voice is heard and valued, where custodians of culture do not disappear, but continue to live and develop, preserving their uniqueness at the heart of modernity. It is both a challenge and an opportunity. Time will tell whether preserving heritage can become the thread that unites the entire planet in understanding and respect for its priceless treasures.